The Apostle Paul met Jesus on the Damascus Road in Acts 9. That was in 34 AD. It was an amazing story of Paul's encountering the resurrected Jesus. Our chapter today is Acts 22, and 13 chapters later, Paul is retelling his story from Acts chapter 9 here in chapter 22. We have 9 in 22. But what makes this pretty incredible is Paul is telling the conversion story, not just in 22, but in 59 AD. He was converted in 34 AD, and now it's 59 AD. Think about this. 25 years later, he tells about his encounter with Jesus with a freshness and a conviction like it happened yesterday. Welcome to the 260 Journey. Your personal story of you and God is powerful. It's not old, though you may be. It is important, and people need to hear it, and you need to tell it. Paul's story is not in a church after a powerful worship service. He's telling his story in Jerusalem to a hostile mob. Their hostilities in chapter 21, they beat him, they have him in chains, and Paul wants to speak. And that's Acts 22. This is what Paul says to the hostiles, starting in verse 6. But it happened that I was on my way approaching Damascus about noontime. A very bright light suddenly flashed from heaven all around me. I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? I answered, Who are you, Lord? He said to me, I am Jesus the Nazarene, with whom you're persecuting. And those who were with me saw the light, to be sure, but did not understand the voice of the one who was speaking to me. And I said, What shall I do, Lord? And he said to me, Get up, go into Damascus, and there you'll be told of what has been appointed for you to do. But since I could not see because of the brightness of that light, I was led by the hand by those who were with me, and I came to Damascus. I've heard it said that a man who has an argument is always at the mercy of a man who has an experience. Paul had an experience that he's willing to die for. It's so important to him that he tells and retells his story of Acts 9 3 times in the book of Acts. In fact, the last time he tells it is in Acts 26, which is 62 AD, 28 years after his conversion. See, your story is powerful. When you don't know what to say when you're engaged in a talk about religion with someone, tell them your story. Ask them, can I tell you my personal story that changed me forever? Paul did that, and his audience was a tough crowd. Second, your story never gets old. Tell it even if it's 30 years old. You may be older, but God is the same. It's still effective. It seems there's no expiration date on telling it. That's why we see the Apostle Paul doing it. One of my spiritual heroes and ministry partners is ex-gang member Nicky Cruz. His story is told about in The Cross and the Switchblade. Nicky was part of the notorious New York City gangs called the Mau Maus. David Wilkerson comes to New York City in 1958 and wins Nicky Cruz to the Lord. In a few weeks, I'll be preaching with Nicky in Lima, Peru, and Nicky will tell his conversion story much like Paul and with the same passion and conviction. Think about it. Nicky's story is 61 years ago, and it's powerful every time. His story has literally brought tens of thousands to Christ. Finally, don't underestimate the power of your testimony. It's funny, Paul never refers to his epistles when he talks to people. You never hear the Apostle Paul say, I wrote this letter that one day will be in the Bible, and you should listen to me as I quote it. See, before you quote the Bible, you may be able to lessen the gap between people by telling them what changes your life. When you tell your personal story like Paul did, you're using one of the great weapons that God gave to us to conquer the devil. Listen to it in Revelation 12:11. They defeated him, the devil, by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. You may think my story is not that great. Let me read to you something that Louis Giglio said. People say all the time, I don't have a good testimony because they think their story has to involve some dramatic story of change from bad to good. But Jesus didn't come to save people this way. Sin doesn't make us bad, it makes us dead. Jesus came to save by bringing the dead to life, and that's an amazing story. Thanks for joining the 260 Journey.